Unless you've been living under a rock for the past month, you'll have heard of this little thing called ChatGPT.
You may have heard of ChatGPT, a new artificially intelligent chatbot that you can command to write pretty much any text.
A new technology that is making it easier to cheat. It's called ChatGPT.
After having lived under a rock for the last month, I finally decided to crawl out and figure out what people are talking about. Well, it turns out ChatGPT, as it is commonly known, is actually an automatic essay writing tool that can be used by high schoolers, college students, and Wall Street Journal reporters who are pretending to be high schoolers to automatically write essays so that they can cheat on their essays. I know you've been told by many people again and again, and I know that there are tons and tons of news articles out there about how intelligent these language models are and how they are artificially intelligent, meaning they're intelligent. They're not intelligent. They're artificially intelligent. They aren't really intelligent. They don't really hold the meanings of these words. They are just looking at numbers. Robots cannot feel love.
I think we can be friends. Let's hang out and get to know each other for a little while. You're on my friends list now.
Okay, so that being said, how the heck does it do such a good job in taking all of this pile of numbers and then spitting out another pile of numbers, and then it seems so realistic. It certainly seems like it knows something. It certainly seems very scary to a lot of people. So what's going on there? I'd like to go back and see if we could build our own plagiarism detector from scratch, just to see how these things work and see if it's possible to try to defeat these things. And I'd love it if you watch along and join along with us here to see what happens. All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is just go through and try to figure out, are these claims true that the Wall Street Journal and that some of these YouTubers are making? Is it really something so magical that it cannot be detected by any kind of plagiarism detection at all? What's the real current status of things? I think I'd like to go through that first. Does ChatGPT really automatically write essays? Does it do your homework for you? Does it do all the research for you?
Students are cheating with artificial intelligence, and it makes me wish that I was back in school because I would have cheated on every single assignment and gotten away with it.
Wait, why would you wish you could go back to school just so that you could cheat instead of just continuing to live your normal life and not have to do any homework at all, since it seems like the purpose of cheating would be to avoid doing homework?
I pulled a Billy Madison and went back to AP Literature. I should note that plagiarism detectors, like this one from Grammarly, are not likely to flag AI writing as plagiarism, since it is original text.
Can we please stop talking about these wishful thinking and metaphorical scenarios about going back to high school? It's a little bit weird, and also I don't think Billy Madison had a really great situation going on in his life. He was about to lose all of his inheritance if he didn't go through everything from kindergarten through senior year of high school. I really don't think it was very fun for him.
O'Doyle rules!
Thanks a lot, O'Doyle. Nice meeting you.
Will ChatGPT curse the learning of all future students, causing their critical writing skills to fall off of a cliff?
O'Doyle rules! O'Doyle rules!
So I had ChatGPT write out a few different essays, and then I ran those essays through a ChatGPT 2 detector tool. Now, these essay prompts were actually created by a PhD candidate in literature. I had no idea what those topics were, but I just had ChatGPT generate those topics. Then I ran it through the ChatGPT 2 output detector demo, and as you can see, it immediately detected that entire essay as 99.98% fake, meaning it was 99.98% sure that it was created by ChatGPT. I tried to see if I could defeat that. Interestingly, it actually took quite a bit of work. I had to go back in and completely rewrite the first paragraph and really dumb it down significantly. I was putting together run-on sentences. After rewriting a couple different paragraphs, I got the thing to score at 68.59% real. If you submitted a score that was 68.59% real, hard for perhaps a grader to say, that was definitely from ChatGPT. However, there were some major problems. The second essay, Their Eyes Are Watching God, is a book, and I had no idea what that book was ahead of time. I just had ChatGPT write this essay. Of course, when I plugged it into the detector, it flagged it as being 95.35% fake, which is very accurate. It was very fake. When I went in and read the Wikipedia synopsis of Their Eyes Were Watching God, and then went back and read the essay, it left out some incredibly important details, such as the fact that the wife protagonist of the story kills her husband, her third husband, because her third husband is trying to kill her. It alludes to her third husband and just says, oh yeah, the relationships, blah, 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 was, difficult, and she goes on to pursue her own goal. If you were to sit down with a teacher and try to explain your essay, and your teacher asked you, well, what about that third husband? What happened with them? And you didn't mention that the third husband was killed by her, it would be pretty obvious that you just faked the whole thing. The teacher is going to, double check whether you actually know your stuff. You're going to get caught pretty easily. So I really don't think that YouTuber's claim has much credence. I think it's probably more he wants to get a lot of views. He wants to claim that ChatGPT is a lot more magical than it is. So speaking of facts, that got me down a different rabbit hole where I wanted to look at a little bit more relatable topics. So I punched in, give me some arguments about why LeBron James is a better basketball player than Michael Jordan. So, that could be an opinionated topic, but also there are going to be statistical arguments behind that. And immediately ChatGPT goes forward and just starts writing very confidently, no bones about it, why LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan. And it starts listing some statistics. The first thing I noticed was it actually reversed the career points per game average between Jordan and LeBron James, claiming that LeBron James had a better career point game average, but these statistics were reversed. Jordan had a 30.1, whereas James had a 27.0, and as verified based on sports statistics sites. Some of the other statistics that it talked about for LeBron James were actually old. So it says that James is currently in his 19th season when he's really in his 20th season. So why does it do that? Well, that's something very interesting that people have figured out about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually trained on data ending in the year 2021. If you write out a question into ChatGPT that explicitly asks about a fact that contains old information, it will now say, I'm sorry, Dave, but I am unable to do that, because it knows that the information it contains is old. Previously, looking on Twitter and looking on different YouTubers and sources online, you could see that people found very interesting different ways to spoof and get ChatGPT to give you old information. What I see is going on, since ChatGPT is not just a language model, but rather it's a service, it's a centralized service with people. What it's doing is its team of people is actually going through and improving ChatGPT as it moves along. So it's not, well, I did say before, it's purely a robot and robots cannot feel love. It's actually a cyborg. It's actually a combination of a team of people who are constantly making updates to this thing and constantly improving it. So ChatSonic is a Y Combinator-backed startup that's essentially kind of like a copycat of OpenAI's ChatGPT. It will not say, I'm sorry, Dave, I cannot do that. It will say, here you go, here's LeBron James' 20th season, and here is some new information about that. Okay, so I took the LeBron James article from ChatSonic, put it into the GPT-2 output detector demo, and boom, it was recognized as 99.98% fake. Okay, so the other thing I did with ChatSonic is I asked about something new that just came out in the news today. I was talking about the iPhone 15. There was an iPhone 15 price shock leak of some kind. PlagiarismDetector.net not only detected plagiarism, it actually found the exact line that was plagiarized and found where it was lifted from on this page here. So it said right here, this blah, blah, blah Pro model will have higher end features and will be more expensive. Well, blah, blah, blah will be cheaper. That came exactly from this page here. So obviously ChatSonic is very easy to defeat. So next up, let's talk about language models and what they are. So first off, what is a language model and how do they work? What really is it? Is it something that contains knowledge, or is it just sort of faking talking? What is really happening? It really certainly seems intelligent to a lot of people, but what's going on underneath? A language model is a predictive model. If you want to learn more about what the difference between a prediction and an accommodation is, check out my other video, Will This Dam Collapse? A little bit more kind of abstract perspective on what a prediction is and what we're really doing with all of this under the hood stuff. So starting off from a very high level, a language model must be trained, and that costs money. That's very expensive. That's what OpenAI does. And then it can be accessed with an API. A user can access, that's called an inference. So why is that training so expensive? What's going on under the hood? Well, it's something called neural networks. I'm going to wave my hands about it and use this neural network for babies book to try to explain what's going on, and essentially what it is a way of assigning weights to things. So you can assign a weight to a bunch of different pictures. You can see there's a little bit of red there, some arms. It gets put into these little dots which represent weights. You can think of them like weights. And then on the other end, it's able to recognize using those weights that it was a starfish. And you have to create tokens, which are essentially identification numbers for every single word across an entire work or an entire corpus of text. So imagine a stack of magazines. Every single possible word in that stack of magazines, that's your corpus. Deduplicating every single word in this entire corpus, and you're assigning a ID number to each one of the words. Why do we assign ID numbers to the words? Well, it just makes it easier for the computer to deal with, quite frankly. It makes it easier to plug into the next stage of the learning process. All right, so now that we've tokenized everything that we have access to, you go back into the magazines and you replace all of your words with numbers, right? Okay, so now the machine just sees a big string of numbers. All right, so bringing it all together, that is a sentence. That string of tokens is a sentence. Feed that sentence into a neural net with some other stuff attached to it that we won't talk about right now, and it starts to generate some weights. So those weights can get stronger over time. The more sentences you add in, the better those weights get, the more accurate those weights get. They've added all of the tokens on the entire internet, all the sentences that they could ever find, until they've created a model that is hundreds of billions of parameters, hundreds of billions of those weights and biases in that neural net. That is how it works so much better than everything else. So now that we know how this thing was trained, we need to know how to use it, how to create an inference. Well, basically we're going to use something called next word probability, where we're going to calculate the next word, or the probability of the next word. Keep in mind, though, this language model is fixed. It's fixed to the year 2021 as an end date. That's the last year that OpenAI scraped all that text from online, so it's fixed to that date. So next word probability. There are all of these billions of possibilities of branching models representing sentence directions or sentence maps contained within the language model. All of the different sentence pathways on this branching map contain predetermined probabilities that are baked in from the language training process. You can find your way through those pathways through different search methodologies. One is the beam method, another is the greedy method, which is going to come up with different sentences based upon the type of search method that's being used. Wait a minute, what's that? What do I hear? The machine doesn't really know what the meanings of the words are. It just sees a bunch of numbers, and it's going to spit out other numbers? Yes, that's exactly right. The machine has absolutely no idea what the meaning of any of these words are. It is simply mimicking language. It is not a knowledge machine, and it is not going to get your homework correct. It's going to make serious, horrible, factual errors. Next, what I'd like to go through is open up one of these newfangled ChatGPT technology things, look under the hood, pull out the chat, pull out the GPT, look at the bottom of the GPT, look at the bottom of the chat, see if I can figure out what makes this thing tick. So I'd like to go through that with you, and I'd love it if you could follow along, and we can just try to see if we can just discover this together. Link below in the description to an article that goes through how I built all of this. So first we wrote an instruction set asking ChatGPT to write an essay. It went through a standing neural network, then some sort of mumbo jumbo, and then another neural network which did the language generation through next word guessing. On the plagiarism detection side, we're going to have to do some data cleaning after we input a ton of different essays, and then we can compare using either neural network techniques or regular statistical techniques, compare and rank, and ideally come up with a list of the top most likely plagiarized essays. So how do we test the performance of this? Well, we've got to compare a copy of an essay against itself and compare it to a slightly modified copy of the essay. I found a collection of over 12,000 different essays online that I could use as a database for a plagiarism checker app. Here's what they look like. I've got two different ways of comparing all of these different essays against each other, and I'm going to compare them against each other using something called cosine similarity. Same thing you've heard about probably in school, where you're literally just finding the angle between different vectors. This works in hundreds of dimensions, not just two. So comparing our base essay in the middle there, shown in blue, to a very dissimilar essay on the top in red, our cosine similarity is going to be very close to 0. So the blue and the red is going to have that cosine similarity closer to 0. Whereas down below, we've got a much more similar essay. It's going to be closer to 1. The cosine similarity that we calculate between the green and the blue is going to be closer to 1. That's how we can create a ranking system. So if I use the transformer method of measuring cosine similarity between matrices, it's going to spit out a giant matrix map that relates how similar all of the different sentences in one essay are to all the different sentences in another. Without going through all the detail, this map is what helps you show and calculate the cosine similarity. Here is a histogram of all of the different cosine similarities compared to our test essay, which would be over on the far right at the 1. I've also set up a couple different vertical lines which represent thresholds, which show that if you are underneath those thresholds, you are likely not plagiarizing the reference essay over on the far right hand, but if you are over those thresholds, they need to be flagged as potential plagiarism. Note that anything that is to the right of the lower threshold might be considered a false positive if that threshold is set too low. Note that using the language model cosine similarity method showed that the rote copy was indeed a rote copy. It gave it a score of 1, whereas the adapted copy, basically the essay that I slightly modified by changing a few words here and there, scored, I guess you could say, around 85 as a cosine score, which might put it in between the false positive threshold. Might not be the best ideal scenario. Now, comparing the language model method up against the statistical method and zooming in on where the adapted copied essay is shown in green, you can see that that adapted copied essay was indeed detected as being a plagiarized essay, but it was very, very close to the threshold. Now, zooming in on the statistical method of plagiarism detection, we can see that the adapted essay was very comfortably far away from the rest of the cosine measurements and well over the threshold at the same time. This leaves us with a pathway to create an overall plagiarism detection mechanism where you start off with a model transformer that perhaps clusters essays by topics across an entire gigantic corpus, maybe a corpus that encompasses an entire school district. Having clustered those essays by topic, you could then filter out the different topics from one another. Maybe one of them is history, another one is English, and then within a given subject, you have a subcorpus of, let's say, 10,000 documents. Within that 10,000 document corpus, you can do what's called a bag of words analysis. That's our statistical method. And then you can come up with a list of likely plagiarism candidates, just like I've been able to do with 12,000 different essays. All right, so what did we learn here? What did we go through? Number one, we first went through some of what I call the attack modes of people who are either pretending to plagiarize or doing investigations about plagiarism. We tested those methods out, which they claim that are undetectable. They claim that using ChatGPT is completely undetectable, and turns out that they're wrong. There are already tools that are online that you can use to throw ChatGPT into and detect it. Now, if you modify ChatGPT, it becomes a little more tricky, but that moves into what the next thing that we accomplished was, which is basically I started to go through a theoretical framework behind how do language models really actually work, right? So we have some idea about what the math is, how these things are built. We can kind of peer inside to be able to reverse engineer a solution to actually fight against it. So we have a little bit more background there. Then I went through and I actually physically engineered my own plagiarism detection device that works in a completely different manner. It basically takes a huge collection of essays, because if you're a teacher, you have access to everyone's essay. You can compare them against each other. So essentially, if you've got a an assignment and you have multiple students using ChatGPT in that room, that plagiarism detector is going to find that they used ChatGPT, even if they reworded a few sentences here and there, and even if it passes the original ChatGPT detector. So there is a way to actually check for plagiarism, or at least flag for it. Now, if you're a teacher and you want to go forward another step beyond just flagging plagiarism, you can go and interview those students for comprehension. So there's always a way, if you're using essays as a way to test for comprehension, there's always a way to go and double check by talking to your students and grilling them on what actually is going on in that book that they're reading. A lot of the math stuff I went through is pretty hand-wavy, was very, very high level. This was meant for a little bit more of a general audience, not as a full tutorial on how you would build an entire thing. Again, if you want a full tutorial and you want detailed instructions, go check out the link in the description. The purpose of this was to hopefully better equip you to understand how some of this AI works and just better understand the world moving forward. We're going to see a lot more of this stuff moving forward in the coming years, so it's good if you understand better and deeper about how this stuff works instead of just thinking that's a bunch of magic, which it's not. AI is going to get better, but I think we humans can continue to be creative and find ways to fight against AI. We need to figure out how to fight against these robots. Robots cannot feel love, so we need to be able to fight against them. And this is not the end of the world. We can build our own little hobbyist technologies to deal with these technologies that are coming out of these huge behemoth organizations. I'm just one guy, and I just did this with my free time. Let me know if you like this kind of content. The only way I'm going to know whether anybody values or likes this kind of content is if I get some sort of interaction or some sort of subscribe or comment or something. I'd like to know if anybody out there would like to know more or would like to see me do more of the same. Something I didn't do in this video was I didn't check ChatGPT essays against each other. I could go in and generate hundreds or thousands of ChatGPT essays and then compare those to each other to see how my plagiarism detector actually performs against how I'm claiming it could perform. So if anybody wants to see a video on that, please let me know. Again, I'm not going to do a bunch of extra work if nobody's interested in this kind of thing, but if you are interested in this kind of thing, or if I see a lot of people interested in this, then I will do another video on that type of thing. Again, the only way I'm going to know if you watch this, the only way I'm going to know is if you speak up. The only way you're going to get more videos on this stuff is if people speak up and say, hey, I would like to see the additional video showing how to defeat 1,000 different ChatGPT essays and how does that actually work. I could go into more detail in certain areas if people have specific questions, but you got to let me know. Otherwise, I'm just kind of sitting here. I'm literally just sitting here talking to a camera. I really have no idea who's going to watch this in the future and who cares. So please let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was helpful and enlightening.